All right. Today's guest is someone I've been a huge fan of for years, a master of the loop pedal, a one man jukebox, and one of the most consistently jaw dropping live performers I've seen and had the pleasure to book. Whether he's lighting up the stage solo or fronting Lazy Syrup Orchestra, this guy brings a kind of musicality that leaves you halfway convinced he's made a deal with the devil and somehow got the better end of it. So I grew up on Cortez Island, so I've always been a big, very partial to musicianship, real musicianship, and this man is in absolutely no short supply of it. So yeah, let's get into it with the one and only Mark Woodyard. Hey,
Thanks
buddy.
for having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for jumping into our sweet little new space festival and Space Makers Network. I'd say you're probably the most famous guy we've had in yet. So we're slowly moving up in the world. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you're here. I guess on the topic of musicianship, I thought maybe we'd start with just a couple of questions about your process.
Yeah.
Much of what you do when you're solo with the live looping, and often a lot of your songs are sort of like a snowflake. No, everyone's different sort of thing in your live performances. So I guess like when you walk on stage, I guess I'll just preface the question with sometimes I look at like a painting and I think, where was the first place that brushstroke went? Like
Mhm.
how did the artist think about the song? Like, did they know that was going to be what they painted, or did it sort of change as it went? And I think a lot of people are interested in that process. So I guess the question would be like, when you walk on stage with a song in mind, you have a certain sequence or plan. What's kind of going through your head in those first few moments when you're kind of starting into a sequence? And is there a sound or a rhythm or something that you kind of first commit to that's sort of your happy place? And just maybe kind of give us a little bit of an idea of maybe slightly what happens beforehand and then what actually happens when you're there in the moment.
Yeah, well, it's funny with the art form of looping. I used to, as I got bigger sets and things, I was like, I had this mindset like I got to prepare and have something together. I'm got this, hour long set, and I'm playing in these bars for really long 3 hour sets, and you're kind of just free forming a lot of stuff, and there's not really any time frame. You can kind of take it wherever, and there's no dance floor. You're kind of just doing your thing. So then when you all of a sudden that's compressed into an hour, you like want to make the most of that, but at the same time you don't want it to be rigid and have it. I remember planning set lists in the beginning, and then I'd step up on stage and I'm like, I'm not starting with the song I have for like I it would just change immediately, and I kind of knew that I was like, I'm not going that direction. So instead of planning sets, I started to do this thing. I remember for my first set, I had a solo set at Shambhala, and I'd never played Shambhala before. And I was, obviously a bit nervous and things like this, but I instead of like rigidly planning a set, I had a couple ideas of new things I wanted to do, but more on the drive there, I kind of just sat in silence and was just kind of thinking like, well, I could do this and I could do that. And just having some thought experiments of what I could do, first of all, helped calm my nerves. And second of all, just gave me a bit of confidence walking into the set, knowing that like, oh yeah, we have these things to go to, but also trying to keep that playful energy of a bar set where I step on stage and I don't really know what's going to happen. And to answer your question, like, yeah, whether it starts with a rhythm or a little riff, or to me, it's if I've been playing my guitar enough and I'm comfortable and I've created a few sounds on my guitar board that maybe are new or novel, and I start somewhere that's kind of new for me, that will translate to the audience. If I'm excited and kind of if I'm just going through the motions and kind of just like doing something I've done, even if it sounds cool on paper, it's not gonna translate in the same way. So I'm always trying to put myself in this place of like, okay, once I have a rhythm and something going, like where almost like active listening. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. Just because, as a musician, maybe separate from a DJ or, of course, a producer who's sitting and slowly doing things, you have that ability to sort of tweak and move through the system. And your core skill as a musician allows you to carry moments musically in a way that is a really unique and something that I've watched. I've booked you quite a few times now with festivals, Pacino Bay, and
Yeah.
every time I see you play, it's just there that musicality comes through. And so I guess like as an add to that question, do you have any stories or a situation or where you're doing your thing, and I'm sure this happens a lot as you're being actively listening to the crowd. Have you ever really had like a major change in direction take place due to like a an individual or a vibe, or is there a way that the audience is there like a specific story you could tell us where the audience kind of took you away and kind of brought you to a place and you sort of followed them to a more extreme place than you would normally?
Yeah, I think that, like, tempo change is a big thing. Again, when you're getting through an hour, often I'm starting a set at 100 or 105 BPM, so kinda, like, slow mid-tempo, and then if I feel like riding that energy for a while and I feel like people are into it, I'll try to ride that as I don't wanna have to rely on, like, house music's great, and I'll play house music all day, but if I have to, like, I find if I jam it into house territory or quicker tempo territory too quickly, sometimes you can almost like lose that energy. It's almost like dispersing it too quickly. So if I can ride that mid tempo energy, but sometimes it's like, yeah, people are going, and then you're like, okay, well maybe I should push this up and ride the energy. But yeah, I think it's set to set, and it like again, it's like it's a bit paying attention to the crowd, but also it's a bit like sometimes I'll just grab something. I have this function on the looper where you can grab if you've looped something, you can grab like a bar of it. And sometimes if you're grabbing a bar of that, it sometimes creates a rhythm or a feeling or something. Sometimes it's just and it's like all of a sudden I'll be surprised. I'll be like, "Ooh, there's something there." And sometimes I'll take that and just create some it's almost like a little seed and it starts to grow into this whole other
Mm,
thing. And so really being instead of just like, okay, again, like song, 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 it's like if we're all of a sudden going with this moment, it's like, okay, well, we're going there now. And this is the obvious place to go and trying to turn off your thinking brain and get into the just reacting
mhm.
brain. Um yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, and as time progresses, you know, the tools and the interfaces and the controllers and whatnot that have sort of been invented in the past decade and more and continue to be used, and all the syncs and everything that allows for such amazing integration of instrumentation into to kind of get the best of both worlds between the perfect rhythms of electronic music and all of the sounds that can be used, and then and yeah, so shout out to all the engineers and technicians and people who are making these sort of interfaces that allow amazing musicians like you to interface with those types of dance grooves in that way. So
Mhm.
that's really great. Yeah. So I know that you played in bands in earlier in your career, and yeah, things like that. So maybe briefly, like just walk me through a quick arc of your sort of musical influences, if you had any in your early years, and some key early sets that you think set you in one direction or another. And I guess I asked that as a first sort of overview, but then to sort of, if possible, point out maybe a point within that arc in your early years that really kind of turned you in the direction of electronic music, or something that sort of brought you to this loop and this the evolution of your of what you do.
Yeah, yeah. I'll try to do it in a Cole's Notes fashion. I grew up in a musical family. I picked up a guitar pretty young, and then I was lucky enough I had classmates who were also picking up instruments, and so we formed a band and had a really gifted drummer named Jordan Story. He came to our school in grade 4, and he was super talented naturally, and we're like, "Oh, we gotta catch up to him." And his parents had 2 drum sets and a bunch of amps and stuff in their basement, and they were just like, "You can come over here anytime and play." So I always say we got the suck out, like we just sucked, and then eventually stopped sucking. And we'd enter talent shows and play in the courtyard at school, and we were terrified. And then I also grew up playing music in church, and they often had guitar players, but they never had drummers. So I played a lot of drums in church. But during that time, it was all like Green Day, Offspring, and then the grunge stuff, Soundgarden, Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins. I remember having a recording Smashing Pumpkins Melancholy into a tape and walking home one day and just being like, how does this sound this good? Like I couldn't understand. Like sonically, it just like blew my head apart. Like I couldn't even fathom it. And then high school is like even heavier stuff like Tool and Deftones and Nine Inch Nails. And then I got into classic rock and then I got into hip hop. And along that way, I don't know if you remember those like big shiny tunes. They had like Prodigy and Chemical Brothers. And I always thought like, wow, this is some crazy sounds they're making. It almost as like straddling on that rock electronic.
Mhm.
And then Justice Cross came out, and obviously Daft Punk I'd listened to a ton, but Justice Cross was even more like heavy but funky. And I was like, oh, this is like so good. It just has that edge to it, but is also like locked in and dancey. So that
Mhm.
was the musical stacking of that, and playing in a band that whole time. And then once the band dispersed, and I saw Reggie Watts on Conan, saw him using a looping machine, and he had 4 channels, and I always looped with delay pedals, and I was like, "Oh, he has 4 channels, that means you could loop one thing over here and loop another thing and then bring things in and out." I was like, "This is like you're your own DJ," and, like, that changes everything, especially
Mhm.
when to a drum machine, then you're kinda off to the races, you can do anything. So, um, yeah, that was kind of the progression there, and, yeah, what was the tail end of the question?
I kind of got lost in it because it was just an interesting answer. It's just more just like things that kind of made you. It was the musical arc, and then it was also just if there was a moment. Sometimes I think the listener finds it interesting to understand like a moment of inception or a point where maybe I'm just romanticizing that idea where there was something that kind of clicked, and maybe that was a Reggie Watts moment.
Yeah, I feel like there's multiple moments like that for me. There's
Yeah,
certain I don't know if you have this too when you hear I remember the first time I heard Caribou's first album, Andorra, which is a Caribou's had this funny progression too, because he started very indie and very like his first album almost sounds like the Beach Boys on acid. Like it's like a weird
yeah,
it's super trippy and but it's more of an indie album, like, has multiple instruments, and I heard the song Irene from that album. I remember where I was sitting, and I was like, I'd never heard anything like it, and I feel like there's so many moments like that, whether you're at a festival or whether someone shows you something and you remember where you were when you first heard it, and you're like, "I haven't heard anything like this," and this kind of, like, changes everything in my musical landscape, and
yeah,
in terms of like my career, like I never actually saw music was just always something I was gonna do and I was always doing. And I didn't really have a 5-year plan for like making it a career, but it just kind of eventually happened that way. But I
yeah.
feel like along that journey, there was multiple moments where I'm like, whoa, I just all of a sudden it just opens up almost like a curiosity. Like, well, I have to investigate how this was made, or I'm inspired to make sounds like this, et cetera, et cetera. So
Follow that feeling, and follow that vibe. That's
yeah.
great. Thanks, man. So one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit just about that, just before we kind of switch over a little bit, but Twitch and the pandemic were sort of, I think, interesting points for musicians and DJs. Number one, I think a lot of bands had a hard time during the pandemic, and it seemed like DJs were producing like rabbits, reproducing like rabbits. But some DJs really shone out, particularly musicians who are visually interesting to watch, like turntablists, and of course, things that acts like you who are very interesting to watch. Oh, look, all the stuff that they're doing. Um, so how did Twitch change your creativity or reveal anything about your creativity or your limitations, or like how did that sort of play into things for you?
Yeah, well, at first I found whatever, it was frustrating at first.
Of
It was
course.
well, there was aspects of it that were frustrating, but also it was also just a mechanism just to stay sane in a weird situation. So that was like people I run into people and they're like, "Oh man, your streams through the pandemic that was really helpful." And I was like, "Well, thanks, but it was also just me." Like it was me selfishly being like, "I need to make music otherwise I'm going to go crazy."
Live and
And
breathe it. No, you've said that before. You're a musician that way. You live and breathe it. I have a friend, Cameron, amazing guitarist, and he's just the kind of guy. He rolls out of bed and he just starts playing his guitar. He can't help it. He breathes it.
totally. So
Yeah.
then yeah, in terms of the creativity, like instead of fighting it, you got to roll with it. And also I started to think of ways, and I look at like Duncan, who's in Lazy Syrup and Funk Hunters. He was started streaming on Twitch, and he definitely like he evolved an entire visual setup just from Twitch, and now things are back, and he's video mixing Funk Hunter shows and lazy shows now. And so all that skill he used during the Twitch pandemic, he mirrored into now creating a live show that's so dynamic and so visually interesting, where you have live cameras, you have visuals, and he's mixing everything from the stage, which is really cool. And it's like a form of expression and creativity that he gets to do while he's DJing. And I found with Twitch, it was like all about, these long form shows, less about like it's not about keeping a dance floor going. I had to almost get used to it. It's like, it's okay to have these down moments and just chat for a bit, or to have these moments like explaining a few things, or just being weird or silly, or yeah, more about community than it was necessarily, obviously, about the music as well. And but yeah, I found that aspect of it interesting. And just like anything, it's trial and error. You learn as you do it, and you learn by watching other people and just seeing how they're doing it and take ideas. And
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I think it's interesting how it still kind of has a life. People are still streaming, not to the same degree, but there's still people doing it, and it's a connector. I think people don't even. I turned a lot of people on to Twitch. Or you're making dinner at night, you can just throw on. I'll just throw on Duncan. He'll be DJing for 3 hours, and you're like, "This is awesome! I get a free show." Like, and you're exposed to a ton of music you never would have heard, including like people like Disclosure. They were doing like Ableton workshops on Twitch, and it's just like, when do we have access to two of the best house producers in the world giving you a walkthrough of like one of their Ableton files, and you're like, this is crazy. So the aspects of that I loved about it, like such a
Yeah,
cool.
it adds like a personal touch, kind of like a in the living room feel, and it, although I'm a strong proponent of in person things, I that's what I do. I bring people into spaces and physical spaces together. But the Space Makers Network we have here also does, and like a Twitch, but sort of for us, it's like a community space where we can communicate like this, a little bit slower, a little more real, and I think, although I don't necessarily say that people should be getting those dopamine hits, those social dopamine hits they should be doing it in real life. But I do think that there's a place for these types of more sort of like the living room vibe. And I think that's something that is important moving forward. So, we mentioned Lazy Syrup Orchestra, probably one of my top favorites. By far, I've always been a big fan again of all the musicianship, and I love how we mentioned Dunks, and shout out to him and his his success as a funk hunters, and then his desire to come and create a big band and do something as funky and awesome as Lazy Syrup. And everyone in that group is worth a million shout outs for sure.
Mm.
But I just wanted to say, because I'm talking to you, what would you say is something that your bandmates rely on you for, that no one else brings? Obviously, not in a competitive way. That's silly, but just in something that you feel that you bring, that you think that the band sort of. It could be musical. It could just be personal, and feel free to speak to any or.
Yeah, just to give you context, like Lazy had been going for 3.5, 4 years before I even entered it. And when I did enter it, um, just with a kind of few shows with them, I realized I was stepping into this thing that already had this momentum and this feeling around it. And just being with these guys, I was tentative to, I'd been in a band, and I kind of liked my autonomy, just my own little creative space. So entering a band, I had my guard up a bit, just being like, okay, obviously these guys are cool and their music's cool, but like, I don't know, I just want to make sure boxes are checked before I just commit to entering this thing. And obviously that just kind of happened very organically. But I realized, first of all, they're all in it to make music, purely, and the intention there was very pure, which is very evident from immediately from the time I spent jamming with them and playing shows. And then I kind of had to step back a bit and be like, okay, regardless of my talent, and I bring guitar, and I bring a bit of and I picked up a trumpet. I hadn't played a trumpet since high school band,
Mhm.
so I picked up that again. I had a reason to play it, and then vocally, and I was like, how do I fit into this thing that's already kind of, I don't want to overrun it or do anything like, how do I fit in bringing my talent, but also like contextually fitting that into what Syrup is, and also how do I perform in it? How do we, you know, blah blah blah, like who talks, who doesn't, blah blah, all these things. So that was just again a trial and error thing. And as the first year I was with them in 2019, I played a lot of gigs, played my first Bass Coast, played all these gigs, blah blah blah. And within that time, I feel like over that year, I really discovered like more about the group. And then also we just started writing more music, and through that, um, figuring out what I bring, and what I bring, I think, not aside from the musicality of like the instruments, if we're all understanding what the goal is of certain songs and certain, if a song's brought to the table, does it need guitar? Does it not? Just because I have a guitar doesn't mean every song needs guitar. Like having a musical awareness, putting your ego aside, and um, collectively being like, what is this? And then how can we all like make this the best? And the only arguments are just creative ones, which are like fun arguments.
Totally. And that's great, man. And that's part of being in a band. And, it's not as easy being in a band. I know just even from the dynamics of as someone who produces events, and I'm looking at like, budgets, and I have lots of bands in my events. I don't just have electronic music with the odd band.
I
I
really appreciate
50-50. And, and it's difficult. Bands are coordinating and people are in different places, and it is definitely difficult, but we need it. We need that collaborative space. The obvious thing is that it goes in a direction that it never would have gone had it not been those combo of people. And that is unique into itself. And so, yeah. So anyway, I just very, very thankful for your time here. What's next for you? We're going to talk about a couple shows coming up, but just generally in terms of what's driving you to get up in the morning and some of the things that are motivating you, or is there anything on the horizon that's kind of you're excited about that maybe we should talk about for a sec?
Yeah, well, I'm moving to North Van, in with my partner Kristen, and we're turning a room in their place into a studio. So that's exciting. I, to me, the struggle always is like you want to gig enough that you can live, but also doing creative things like writing. That stuff doesn't pay in the immediate, and so we've done some writing retreats with Lazy, which has yielded a ton of material. And I guess my goal is to like have a studio space at home where I can start writing. I have a lot of backlogged writing that I've done solo and for Syrup, but just having a space in which I'm able to produce from home and do that comfortably. So yeah, I'm in the middle of building that. So that's one exciting thing. Two, Envision festivals coming up in Costa Rica, which I'm playing at and Lazy's playing at. And then before that, we have which I think you're going to talk about is Dice, which is a night that Civilian Johnny has been spearheading, and Duncan and Civilian, or I think Duncan originally started it at the Waldorf pre-pandemic, and then Johnny's given it new life at a place called Cuccio in Vancouver. It's kind of a basement bar, but he's been showcasing different DJs there in the community, and it's been super fun. And so the Dice night at the Hollywood Theater, which is a bigger venue, it's kind of like every 3 or 4 months we're doing like a bigger Dice night at that venue. And this time around, it's with Civilian and our friend J-Pod, who's obviously local legend producer. So he'll be coming down from Vernon for that. So that's very exciting. And then Lazy's playing at the Commodore, which we played last spring and sold it out. And we're trying to, I feel like we're trying to make that a yearly thing, playing the Commodore every spring. So that's very exciting.
That is very exciting. The Commodore is kind of like a bucket list item for people, I think, generally who are in the zone. And it's sort of like a marker in a career to sell it out, and then to, hey, it is what it is. If it keeps selling out, you'll probably keep doing it. That's kind of how it usually works, right?
Well, and aside from it being about the show, it's like, okay, once you have a show like that, you're like, okay, what are we going to do? Then it's like,
yeah,
that's like, okay, how are we going to make it better than the last one? What new songs are we going to bring? Like, how are we going to, like, and what's fun about Commodore, like last year we had a full horn section. We had 2 trumpet players and a trombone player. And then I got to I was like helping write porn parts and do all this stuff. It's very like fun once you have a venue like that and a full thing. You're like, okay, what do we do with this now? And
yeah.
so
You're not. It's like it's beyond being even a feature act at a festival, because a festival has its sort of production, and it's where you're really together able to we're here, we're bringing this guy on, who's the
Yeah,
special
we have a
guest,
blank
who's the
canvas. We have a blank canvas, and we can do what we want with it. So
yeah,
that's exciting, but also like, what do we do?
yeah, for
So,
sure.
but
Um, yeah, no, Dice is great. I've been following Civilian. He's a star. I had him at the Waverly, and we'd be bringing him back some point. And of course, J Pod. Great, great, great act. First time I saw him was at Fandango Farms in Vernon many years ago. He played a certain kind of bass heavy dance hall mashup that I'd never heard. And that was, I don't even know. I
yes.
probably won't even say how long ago it was. But yeah, true masters. And that'll be a killer show, man.
Yeah,
Um,
and I just wanna big up Johnny, like, building community in Vancouver can be tough, and especially just with the limitations with venues and liquor licensing and all this stuff, and, he's really pushed forward to make this happen and bring people together, and, it's just been such a I know people have just been really enjoying it and having Vancouver getting branded the no fun city. When people like that work hard to do things like that, it really needs to be commended.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, shout out to Johnny Civilian for sure. Well,
Yeah.
hey man, we're not going to take any more of your time. We really appreciate you coming down. We also are very stoked that you're going to be Lazy Syrup and you are going to be coming to play Salty Hearts. Um, we're going to be actually doing a pre-public release of Salty Hearts in the next couple hours here on the network. So yeah, we're
Awesome.
super stoked for that, and then we'll be releasing tickets in a couple days publicly. So yeah, man, I'm a huge fan. I'll always keep trying to support you in any way I can. And everyone up in the Comox Valley and the West Coast and Pacino, we all love you to bits. So thank you for doing what you do. And yeah, keep on rocking, brother.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thanks for facilitating this. And yeah, looking forward to the summer.
Yeah,
And this
totally, man. Yeah, and we'll have all of those links and stuff in the show notes and whatnot that people can click into. And yeah, so thanks again, man, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ben.